The colony of Havenfall rested quietly between wide green hills and shallow blue lakes. From above, it looked peaceful, almost fragile. Nearly 3 million humans lived there. They had built homes, schools, clinics, and quiet parks filled with laughter. It was not a military world. There were no warships in orbit. Havenfall existed for one reason only: life. Ethan Call stood on his balcony as the sun dipped behind the mountains, turning the sky gold. Inside the apartment, his wife, Mara, stirred a pot on the stove. Their son, Noah, only 9 years old, sat on the floor with scattered papers, struggling with his homework. It was a normal evening. That normal life mattered to Ethan. For 20 years, he had worked as a human envoy, helping keep peace between species that barely trusted one another. He believed words could stop wars. He believed patience mattered more than power. He believed humanity had a place in the galaxy as builders, not conquerors. At 7:42 p.m., every screen in Havenfall turned black. A calm, artificial voice filled the city. "Attention, citizens. Unidentified vessels have entered the system. Please remain calm." Ethan's heart dropped. He pulled up a live feed on his wrist display. What he saw made his hands shake. Dozens, no hundreds of massive ships slid out of hyperspace above the planet. Their hulls were sharp and dark, built like weapons rather than vessels. He recognized them instantly: the Velkar Dominion, a species known across the galaxy for conquest. They didn't negotiate, they didn't occupy, they erased. Before any message could be sent, before any warning was given, the sky opened. Beams of white fire slammed into the far side of the city. Towers folded inward like paper. The ground trembled. Seconds later, the sound hit, deep, violent, unstoppable. Mara grabbed Noah and pulled him away from the window. Noah screamed. Ethan couldn't move. He watched as fire fell again and again, carving Havenfall apart. They weren't targeting defenses. There were none. They weren't striking factories or ports. They were hitting everything. People ran through streets that shattered beneath their feet. Emergency shelters collapsed as if they were toys. Hospitals filled and then vanished in flame. Ethan finally moved when the next blast hit close. He ran. They made it less than 2 blocks. The shockwave threw them through the air. When Ethan opened his eyes, his ears rang and the world spun. He found Mara first, alive, bleeding, unconscious. Then he saw Noah. His son wasn't moving. Ethan pulled him close, begging, shaking, screaming his name into the burning air. Nothing answered back. When Mara woke and understood what she saw, the sound she made didn't belong to any language. The bombardment lasted 6 hours. When it ended, Havenfall was gone. Millions were dead. The Velkar never landed. They didn't claim the planet. They didn't want it. They wanted a message, and they broadcast that message to the entire galaxy. But while the stars watched Havenfall burn, Earth was already beginning to remember. Because the Velkar believed humanity would cry, beg, and break. What they didn't know was what humanity had been hiding for 2 centuries. The Velkar Dominion did not hide what they had done. They celebrated it. Across every public galactic channel, the destruction of Havenfall was replayed again and again. Cities folding, fires spreading, people running with nowhere to go. The Velkar wanted fear to travel faster than their ships ever could. At the end of the broadcast, their supreme warlord appeared. His name was Kor Vethrin. His skin was marked with deep ritual scars, each one a symbol of a conquered world. His eyes were cold, empty of doubt or regret. "Let this be understood," he said calmly. "Humanity refused tribute. Humanity refused obedience. This is the cost of refusal. Any species that believes treaties will protect them is welcome to test us next." Then he smiled. The signal cut. On Earth, the message arrived 14 hours later. By then, desperate transmissions from Havenfall had already reached home. Final voice notes from parents, broken videos from children hiding in rubble, lists of names that kept growing longer, too long to read aloud. Earth's Global Council convened in silence. No speeches, no anger, just footage. They watched Havenfall die. When the room finally stirred, Ambassador Lin Zhao stood to speak before the Galactic Assembly. She had spent her life solving conflicts without weapons. She had always believed dialogue was stronger than threats. Her voice shook, but she did not stop. The Velkar Dominion carried out an unprovoked extermination of a civilian colony, she said. Over 2 million dead, nearly 500,000 children. This was not war, this was slaughter. She looked up at the hundreds of alien delegates watching. We demand accountability. We demand action. The response came quickly. The Assembly expressed grave concern. They issued strong condemnations. They proposed sanctions and investigations. Words stacked neatly on top of words. Then the Velkar ambassador stood. His name was Therex Maul. He had served the Dominion for decades. As Zhao finished speaking, he began to laugh, loudly, openly, without shame. When he finally stopped, he wiped moisture from his eyes. "You humans are adorable," he said. "You think justice exists because you invented a word for it. The galaxy runs on power. You had none. Now you understand your place." He leaned forward. "We will erase every human world you touch, and when we are finished, no one will remember you ever mattered." Ambassador Zhao said nothing. She simply turned and walked out. For 7 days, Earth went silent. No statements, no threats, no replies. Allies reached out. Some offered ships, others offered shelter. Earth thanked them and refused everything. The galaxy assumed humanity had broken. The Velkar certainly did. Warlord Vethran ordered preparations for the next strike. 3 more human colonies were marked. The Dominion had tasted blood, and they were eager for more. They believed Earth was grieving. They believed Earth was afraid. They were wrong. On the 7th day, deep beneath Earth's moon, sealed doors older than most civilizations began to open, and across human space, a single message was delivered to survivors like Ethan Cole. It contained no explanation, only 2 words: "We remember." The galaxy thought silence meant surrender, but silence was never Earth's weakness. It was Earth deciding where to aim. Ethan Cole read the message again. "We remember." Below it were coordinates, no sender, no explanation. For a long time, he stared at the screen without moving. Mara was asleep in the next room, exhausted from crying. Noah's room was empty, too quiet, too clean. Ethan felt like the world had hollowed him out and left him walking inside a shell. He didn't know why the message was sent to him. He only knew one thing: the people who killed his son were still alive, still laughing. That was enough. Ethan kissed Mara's forehead before dawn and left without waking her. He told himself he would come back. He told himself he had to. He didn't know if either was true. The coordinates led him far from any city, deep into a restricted zone that officially didn't exist. There were no signs, no guards, just a stretch of dead rock and a single metal door buried into the ground. The door opened the moment he approached. An elevator carried him down, far down, deeper than any civilian structure had the right to go. When the doors opened, Ethan stepped into a massive chamber filled with rows of people. Survivors. Some wore bandages, some were missing limbs. All of them carried the same look, loss sharpened into something harder. A woman stood at the front. She wore a dark uniform with no visible rank. Her hair was gray, her posture straight, her eyes calm in a way that made Ethan uneasy. "My name is Commander Aiko Ren," she said. "You are here because you lived. Someone you loved did not." No one spoke. She raised her hand, and the air behind her filled with light. A hologram formed, an image of the Galactic Assembly, its symbols shining and useless. 200 years ago, Aiko said, humanity entered the galactic community, believing laws would protect us. We believed civilization meant safety. The image shifted. Velkar warships, burning worlds, silent council chambers. We were wrong. The next image made Ethan's breath stop. Ships he had never seen before, sleek, angular, silent, hundreds of them. "In public, we played the role assigned to us," Aiko continued. "Peaceful traders, weak diplomats, a species that avoided conflict at all costs." She paused. "In private, we prepared." The room filled with images, hidden facilities under moons, shipyards inside asteroids, training grounds buried beneath oceans. "We built a force the galaxy was never meant to see," she said quietly. "Not to conquer, not to rule, only for the day someone decided our children were acceptable targets." Ethan's hands clenched. "The Velkar believed we were helpless," Aiko said. "They believed we would beg." Her eyes hardened. "They mistook mercy for weakness." She looked directly at the survivors. "You are not here to mourn. You are here to remember who we are." The lights dimmed. The hologram shifted again. Velkar ships vanishing. Silence where stars should be. Ethan felt something change inside him. Not relief, not joy, purpose. Because while the galaxy still debated justice, humanity had already finished preparing the answer. The Velkar scouting fleet entered human space with confidence. 40 warships, enough firepower to erase a small world. Their commander, Sublord Rethik Var, was young and ambitious. This mission was meant to be simple. Scan human defenses, confirm their weakness, return home with proof. He expected fear. He expected chaos. He found nothing. Human space looked empty. Trade routes were quiet. Civilian stations drifted peacefully. No fleets, no defenses, no response. "Begin deep scan," Rethik ordered. Sensors swept outward. For exactly 17 seconds, everything was normal. Then the stars disappeared. Not dimmed, not obscured, gone. Rethik froze as every external display turned black. Navigation systems screamed errors. Long-range sensors returned nothing but static. It was as if the universe itself had been switched off. "Report!" he shouted. No one answered. 3 seconds later, the stars returned, and the Velkar fleet was no longer alone. Human ships surrounded them. They had not arrived through hyperspace. There were no energy spikes, no warnings. One moment there was empty space, then suddenly they were there. Perfect formation, hundreds of vessels, silent, motionless. Rethik tried to count them. He stopped at 200. His hands trembled as he opened a communication channel. No signal escaped. Weapons failed to respond. Engines refused to engage. Hyperspace drives went dead, shut down by a technology his engineers couldn't even identify. A single message appeared on his command screen. 7 words. "You killed our children. We remember." The Velkar fleet ceased to exist in less than 1 minute. No wreckage, no survivors,
No distress signals. The ships were not destroyed. They were erased. The only proof they had ever been there came from a distant merchant vessel that captured a brief sensor anomaly before everything went silent. 3 days later, Supreme Warlord Kor Vethran received the report. He rejected it immediately. "Impossible," he said. 40 warships do not vanish." He demanded answers from Earth. Earth said nothing. No threats, no explanations, no apologies, only silence. Then, at the Galactic Assembly, a human representative delivered a short statement. "The Velkar Dominion sent armed vessels into human space. Those vessels no longer exist. We strongly advise against repeating this mistake." That was all. When the Velkar ambassador shouted for consequences, she didn't even turn around. Vethran was not used to being ignored. He ordered full mobilization. 3,000 warships, every blade the Dominion had ever sharpened, were assembled, the largest fleet in Velkar history, the same fleet that had crushed 200 civilizations. "This ends now," Vethran declared. Across human space, alarms did not sound. Instead, buried fleets awakened. From moons, from asteroids, from places no one had ever thought to look. 10,000 human warships moved as one. For the first time in centuries, humanity stopped hiding. The Velkar believed they were marching towards prey. They did not realize they were walking straight into judgment.
The Velkar home system was called Prime Dominion. For 6,000 years, it had been the heart of their power. Massive cities covered the planet's surface. Rings of stations and defense platforms surrounded it like armor. No enemy fleet had ever reached it. Supreme Warlord Kor Vethran stood inside the command chamber of the Iron Spire, the largest military station the Velkar had ever built. From here, he had ordered the destruction of Havenfall. From here, he had watched human cities burn. He was not smiling now. Reports flooded in from the edges of Velkar space. Human ships were appearing everywhere, too fast, too precise, too coordinated. Entire patrol groups went silent before finishing their first transmission. "This is impossible," one commander said. "They're bypassing hyperspace limits." Vethran slammed a clawed hand onto the console. "Engage them everywhere." Then Prime Dominion's sensors screamed. 10,000 human ships emerged at once. They did not rush forward. They did not fire. They surrounded the system. Perfect spacing, no gaps, no weak points. For the first time in decades, Vethran felt something tighten in his chest. Fear. He opened a channel. "This is Supreme Warlord Kor Vethran of the Velkar Dominion. You are trespassing in sovereign space. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed." The response came instantly. A human woman appeared on the screen. Gray hair, calm eyes, no visible fear. "I am Fleet Marshal Aiko Wren," she said. "This is not a negotiation." Her voice was steady, cold. "You ordered the destruction of Havenfall. 2 million civilians, hundreds of thousands of children. You broadcast their deaths as a warning." She paused. "This is your warning." Vethran sneered. "You think surrounding us makes you powerful? You are outnumbered. You are fragile. You have 7 minutes," Aiko interrupted. "Evacuate your command staff to the planet. After that, the Iron Spire will no longer exist." The channel closed. Vethran laughed, sharp and bitter. "Fire on them," he ordered. 3,000 Velkar warships surged forward. Weapons filled space with light. Missiles, energy beams, kinetic rounds, everything the Dominion had. None of it reached the human fleet.
Invisible fields swallowed the attacks. Missiles froze mid-flight. Energy scattered like mist. Projectiles simply stopped, then drifted away. Then the humans returned fire. There was no chaos, no wasted motion. Each shot struck a military target. Warships collapsed inward. Defense platforms vanished. Command vessels disappeared without explosions. 11 minutes later, the Velkar home fleet was gone. Over 2 million Velkar soldiers dead. The human ships advanced slowly, methodically, destroying shipyards, weapon arrays, and command centers on the planet's surface. Civilian cities were untouched. The Iron Spire remained. Vethrin stared as space bent around his station. Gravity pulled the structure apart, piece by piece, like metal being stretched by unseen hands. A final message appeared. Your 7 minutes ended 3 minutes ago. The Iron Spire tore itself apart. Across the galaxy, observers watched in silence. The Velkar Empire had fallen in less than half an hour, and humanity wasn't finished. Because destroying a fleet was only the beginning. Earth had come to remove something far more dangerous than ships.
The galaxy expected fire. After Prime Dominion fell, every major network waited for the same ending they had seen 1,000 times before. They expected human ships to rain death on Velkar cities. They expected revenge written in flame. It never came. Instead, the human fleet slowed. They moved through the system like surgeons, not conquerors. Military bases vanished. Weapon factories collapsed. Orbital cannons were dismantled piece by piece. Every structure designed for war was erased with precise, careful strikes. Civilian districts remained untouched. Velkar families watched from their homes as the symbols of their empire disappeared from the sky. No bombs fell on their cities. No warning sirens sounded. No soldiers arrived. Fear spread anyway, because this was worse. Across liberated worlds once ruled by the Velkar, the same pattern repeated. Human ships appeared, destroyed military command centers, freed enslaved populations, and left. No occupation, no demands, no flags planted in victory. A Thessari observer named Irel Voss recorded what he saw from a neutral station near Prime Dominion. "I have studied war for 2 centuries," he said quietly into his recorder. "What I am witnessing is not rage, it is discipline." He paused, watching human ships glide past burning wreckage. "What they are doing is not rage, they are showing restraint." He paused, watching human ships glide past burning wreckage. "They could erase the Velkar completely, they choose not to." That choice shook the galaxy more than destruction ever could. Within 3 days, the Velkar Dominion no longer existed as a military power. They had no fleets, no shipyards, no weapons capable of leaving orbit. In 72 hours, an empire built over 6,000 years was reduced to a single planet unable to threaten anyone. Still alive, still standing. The Galactic Assembly called an emergency session. Delegates shouted, accusations flew. Some screamed genocide, others demanded humanity withdraw immediately. The Velkar ambassador, Therex Maul, stood shaking. "You have destroyed our civilization," he said. "You have murdered millions of our soldiers. You have turned us into prisoners on our own world." The human representative, May Wren, sister to Fleet Marshal Aiko Wren, did not raise her voice. She activated a hologram. The bombardment of Havenfall played again. Children running, buildings falling, screams buried beneath explosions. Over it all, Therex Maul's laughter echoed. The recording ended. May Wren looked at him calmly. "You are alive. Your cities still stand. Your people still breathe. We took only your weapons. We took only your ability to hurt others." She turned to the assembly. "Remember this moment.
Remember the difference. No one spoke, because everyone understood. Humanity was not acting out of anger. Humanity was showing restraint, and restraint, backed by absolute power, was terrifying. Back on the monitoring edge of Velkar space, Ethan Cole stood at a station window, staring at the distant glow of the Velkar sun. He thought of Noah. He thought of Havenfall. He could have hated this mercy. Instead, he stayed, because someone had to make sure it meant something. The galaxy had seen humanity destroy an empire, but the question that now haunted every world was far worse. What would humans do next with that kind of power?
The war was over. That truth spread slowly across the galaxy, like a wound finally closing. Trade routes reopened with caution. Communication channels, once loud with threats, grew careful and polite. No one celebrated, no one cheered. They reviewed history instead. Every government did the same thing. They pulled old records, old votes, old treaties. They replayed moments when humanity had been ignored, mocked, delayed, or quietly exploited. And they asked the same question: does Earth remember? The Thessari Republic asked first. Their ambassador, Kel Varus, traveled to Earth 2 weeks after the war ended. He was received politely and left waiting for 6 hours, not as punishment, as a reminder. When he was finally escorted into a small meeting room, he did not find a general or a war hero. He found a mid-level diplomat named Sarah Chen. She poured tea. She smiled gently. "I assume you're here about the past," she said. Kelvaris swallowed. "We opposed your admission to the Assembly 2 centuries ago. We called your species unstable, primitive. We fear this history may influence your future decisions." Sarah nodded slowly. "We remember," she said. Kel's hearts raced. "But we also remember who voted against the Velkar, who sheltered our refugees, who treated our people fairly when no one was watching." She leaned forward. "The question isn't whether we hold grudges," she said calmly. "The question is whether your future actions outweigh your past mistakes." Kel left Earth carrying a message that spread faster than fear ever had. Humanity was not hunting enemies. Humanity was watching. Elsewhere, the Mori collective grew uneasy. They had used human labor for decades, paid them less, offered fewer protections. They requested a meeting, expecting anger. Instead, Earth was direct. "You exploited us," an ambassador said plainly. "You did not murder our children. These things are not equal." No threats followed, but contracts changed, terms shifted, balance was restored. The galaxy learned quickly. Earth did not shout. Earth did not demand. Earth remembered. At the edge of Velkar space, Ethan Cole continued his duty aboard the monitoring station. He watched Velkar cities rebuild their farms. He watched children play beneath a sky their ancestors once ruled. Some nights, anger returned. Other nights, something softer replaced it: understanding. When asked why he stayed so close to the people who had taken everything from him, Ethan answered honestly: "Because my son deserved a future where this never happens again." The galaxy felt the weight of that promise. Humanity had proven it could end empires, but now the universe waited to see what kind of peace would follow the silence. For the Velkar people, survival felt like punishment. 70 billion lives had been spared, but stripped. No fleets, no weapons, no path to the stars. Their world, once the center of an empire, was now a closed system under silent watch. Fields replaced factories. Workshops replaced war academies. Children learned how to grow food. Instead, for the Velkar people, survival felt like punishment. 70 billion lives had been spared, but stripped. No fleets, no weapons, no path to the stars. Their world, once the center of an empire, was now a closed system under silent watch. Fields replaced factories. Workshops replaced war academies. Children learned how to grow food instead of how to conquer worlds. Many in the galaxy whispered that this fate was crueler than death. The Velkar could see the stars. They just could never reach them again. Earth placed a single monitoring station at the edge of their system. Its mission was simple: ensure the Velkar never rebuilt their military and ensure no one else abused their weakness. Ethan Cole served there for 7 years. He followed every rule, logged every scan, responded to every Velkar transmission with professional calm. He never spoke of Noah, never mentioned Havenfall. But at night, standing at the viewing window, the memories came anyway. He watched Velkar children grow older, children who would never know what their leaders had done, children who would never touch a warship or fire a weapon. Some nights, Ethan hated that. Other nights, he felt something worse: pity. Beyond Velkar space, the worlds once enslaved by the Dominion faced a different struggle. Freedom came suddenly, too suddenly. Some had no governments, some had no leaders. Generations had lived under control, their cultures suppressed, their choices made for them. When the Velkar military vanished, chaos followed. Earth did not send fleets. It sent diplomats. Humans arrived quietly. They helped set up councils, mediated disputes, shared food, medicine, and knowledge. They asked for nothing in return: no tribute, no territory. The galaxy noticed. Species that had once feared human power now feared something else: human patience. The Mori Collective watched closely. They had profited from Velkar expansion. Their resources had come from enslaved worlds. They expected retaliation. Instead, they received honesty. "You benefited from suffering," Earth told them, "so now you will help repair what was broken. No threats, no war, just accountability." Across the stars, a new truth settled in. Humanity was not building an empire. Humanity was building memory into the galaxy. Back on the Velkar homeworld, an elderly woman named Kira Ven watched her granddaughter trace shapes in the dirt. She had once worn a Dominion uniform. She had once believed in conquest. Now she believed in survival. When the child asked why they could not leave their world, Kira did not lie. "Because we did something unforgivable," she said softly, "and because the humans chose mercy instead of erasing us." The child looked up at the sky. "That sounds like weakness," she said. Kira shook her head. "No," she replied, "that is strength we never had." Years would pass and the galaxy would change, but the greatest test of humanity's power had not yet come. 10 years passed. The galaxy that existed after the Velkar War barely resembled the one before it. Borders stopped moving. Fleets stayed docked. Old rivalries cooled, not because hatred vanished, but because everyone understood the cost of letting it grow. No empire expanded, not one. Trade flourished in places once controlled by fear. Disputes that would have sparked wars a century earlier were now dragged into negotiation rooms and forced to end with words. The Galactic Assembly changed too. Before the war, it had been a place of speeches and delay. After the war, resolutions were followed, agreements were respected. Not because the Assembly had power, but because everyone knew what happened when power went unchecked.
Earth asked for nothing. No tribute, no territory, no special status. Human ships returned to trade routes. Human diplomats resumed mediation. Human engineers shared technology that improved lives instead of weapons that ended them. But no one forgot. They remembered Havenfall. They remembered the silence that followed, and they remembered what came after. Fleet Marshal Aiko Ren retired quietly 3 years after the war. She returned to her birthplace and opened a small tea house near a mountain temple. Most customers saw only an old woman with steady hands and kind eyes. Some visitors came from distant worlds. They had heard rumors. They asked questions. How did you defeat the Velkar so completely? They asked. Aiko always answered the same way. War is simple, she said. You remove your enemy's ability to continue. The difficult part is knowing when to stop. When asked why humanity spared the Velkar, she would pause before answering. Because destroying an enemy is easy. Living with what you become afterward is harder. Elsewhere, Ethan Cole left the monitoring station. He requested a diplomatic assignment on a liberated world, one that had never known freedom before the war. He taught children to read, helped farmers improve crops, built schools where prisons once stood. When asked why he chose to build instead of hate, he answered honestly, "My son deserved a galaxy that learned something from his death." Across Velkar space, generations changed. Children grew up knowing stories, not of conquest, but of loss. They learned that power without restraint had cost them the stars. One night, young Sora Ven asked her grandmother Kira why the galaxy felt so quiet. Kira looked up at the night sky. "Because everyone finally understands," she said. "Understands what?" Sora asked. "That peace is not weakness, and mercy is not forgetfulness." The stars shone silently above them, not in fear, in warning. But the galaxy had one final question left to answer. What would humanity do when the memory of war began to fade?
As the years passed, the memory of the Velkar War slowly changed. For those who lived through it, the images never faded. For those born after, the war became a lesson instead of a wound. History classes replaced emergency broadcasts. Memorials replaced rubble. That worried some people, because memory fades faster than consequences. On Earth, debates began quietly. Younger leaders questioned why humanity still held back, why they didn't take control, why they didn't reshape the galaxy now that they clearly could. The older generation listened and remembered. Ambassador Sarah Chen addressed a group of new diplomats one afternoon. Her hair was gray now, her voice softer. "You think restraint was mercy for the Velkar," she said. "It wasn't. It was discipline for us." She let that sink in. The moment we rule through fear, we become what we destroyed. No one argued. Across the galaxy, smaller conflicts still happened. Smugglers, pirates, border disputes. Human fleets intervened rarely and precisely, never first, never without cause, always decisively. On a distant agricultural world once freed from Velkar rule, Ethan Cole grew old. He watched children who had never known chains learn to read beneath open skies. He buried his wife there. He stayed. When asked why he never returned to Earth, he smiled sadly. "I already found home," he said. On the Velkar homeworld, Sora Ven grew into adulthood. She studied farming, engineering, and history. She listened to her grandmother's stories until Kira's voice finally faded into silence. On the day Kira died, Sora stood beneath the stars and understood something her ancestors never had. Power was not taking the sky. Power was choosing not to reach for it. Sora became a teacher. She told her students the truth, not excuses, not pride.
"We lost the stars because we forgot mercy," she said, "and we kept our lives because someone else remembered it." Across the galaxy, monuments to the Velkar War were not statues of soldiers. They were schools, hospitals, trade halls, built where military bases once stood. Humanity watched quietly because they knew something the galaxy was still learning. Peace is not a moment, it is maintenance. And maintenance, like memory, requires something far harder than strength. It requires choice again and again.
50 years after Havenfall burned, the galaxy no longer feared humanity. It respected it. That distinction mattered. Empires had ruled before through terror, others through dominance. Humanity ruled nothing at all, and yet shaped everything. Conflict slowed, expansion stopped. Even the word conquest faded from common use, because no one forgot what happened the last time children were targeted. The Galactic Assembly finally became what it had always claimed to be. Laws mattered now. Votes carried consequences. When violence threatened to return, species didn't look to their fleets first. They looked to Earth, not for orders, for judgment. On Earth, Fleet Marshal Aiko Ren passed away quietly in her sleep. Her funeral was simple. No medals, no speeches about victory. Just a few poems placed beside her grave, written in her own hand decades earlier. One line was repeated often: "Strength is knowing when to stop." Representatives from dozens of worlds attended. Some had once feared her. Others owed their freedom to her decisions. All of them understood what she had carried. Elsewhere, Ethan Cole's health failed slowly. He lived long enough to see his students become teachers, his schools become cities. When he died, he was buried beneath a tree on the world he helped rebuild. His grave read, "Ethan Cole, Father, Teacher, Witness." On the Velkar homeworld, Sora Ven stood before a class of young students. She told them the truth every year without excuses. We were not spared because we deserved it. We were spared because someone else chose to be better than us. The children listened. They always listened. Across the stars, human ships continued their quiet work. Trade, aid, mediation, never expansion, never domination. The hidden fleets still existed. That was the point. They were never dismantled, because humanity understood something deeply uncomfortable. Peace lasts only as long as the memory of its cost, and memory fades. The galaxy was calm now, but the final question remained. What happens when the generation that remembers is gone? 100 years after Havenfall was erased, the galaxy was still at peace. Not a fragile peace, not a fearful one, a practiced peace. New species joined the Galactic Assembly without fleets at their backs. Borders remained unchanged for generations. Trade moved freely. Disputes ended in words more often than weapons. The stars were busy again, but they were no longer loud. On Earth, the story of Havenfall was taught to every child, not as a tale of victory, but as a warning. Teachers did not glorify the war. They spoke instead about the cost of silence and the danger of mistaking kindness for weakness. They taught one sentence above all others: "We remember, so we don't repeat." The hidden fleets still existed, deep beneath moons and oceans, maintained quietly by people who hoped they would never be used again. No one pretended they didn't exist. No one bragged about them either. They were not symbols of power. They were reminders of responsibility. On the Velkar homeworld, Sora Ven grew old. She lived her entire life without ever leaving her planet. She never touched a starship, never walked beyond her sky. And yet she did not feel trapped. Her students built schools, not weapons, farms, not factories of war. When they asked about the past, she told them the truth without bitterness.
We were spared because someone chose restraint, she said, and because of that, we must choose it too. When Sora died, she was buried beneath open stars. Her grandchildren stood beside her grave and looked upward, not with longing, but with understanding. They knew why the stars were distant. They also knew why they were still alive. On a quiet agricultural world far from Earth, a small memorial stood in a public garden. It was simple, just names carved into stone. The names of Havenfall. No statues, no flags, no speeches. People from many species visited it. Some stood silently. Some wept. Some simply placed their hands against the stone and felt the weight of memory. The galaxy never forgot that place because it had learned something painful and true, that peace is not given by councils, not enforced by treaties, not guaranteed by power alone. Peace exists only when those who can destroy everything choose not to. The stars had fallen silent once, not from fear, not from awe, but from listening. And as long as that silence was remembered, the galaxy endured, not because humanity ruled it, but because humanity chose, again and again, to protect it. The end. May this message strengthen your faith and renew your hope. Thank you for staying until the end. If this touched your heart, like, share, and subscribe to Astro Realms for more uplifting content. May God's blessings overflow in your life. See you soon.